Before we get started, I've got some exciting news. HelloFresh is now a proud sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. If you've been thinking about cutting back on grocery bills, avoiding food waste, or just getting dinner on the table without stress, this is your moment because right now, HelloFresh is offering one free item in every box for life. That's right, every single box you order includes a free item forever. And just to give you a taste of what that looks like, get it, taste, I got pineapple upside down cakes in my first order. I originally discovered HelloFresh during the pandemic, and I fell in love with learning new recipes and expanding our dinner routine. I let it go for a while because, hey, I live in Chicago with world-class restaurants on every corner, but with today's rising costs, HelloFresh is back on my table, and I'm so glad it is. So if you're ready to save time, money, and dinner, go to divorceandbeyond.com/HelloFresh and sign up today to grab that free item for life. You can also find a link in the show notes or divorceandbeyond.com/HelloFresh. And now let's get into today's episode.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
Divorcing and leaving somebody who is this type of personality, this antagonistic, coercive controller, high conflict, like narcissistic, everything is different. You are not leaving somebody who is normal and has a normal, healthy capacity of reasoning, of regulating themselves, of being logical, of compromising. No, you are trying to leave someone who is not normal. And so the rules and the game changes because of that. You have to protect yourself.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today's episode is one that so many of you have been asking for, and frankly, it's one that so many of you need. So we're going to dive deep into what it really takes to navigate a divorce from a narcissistic partner, or one that exhibits narcissistic behaviors, and we'll explain that in the episode. And I'm not going to be just talking about it from a legal and logistical side. We're actually going to dive beneath into the emotional survival strategies, the parenting challenges, and the post-separation abuse that too often follows and makes this so complicated and hard to heal from. Joining me is someone who brings both clinical expertise and real-world tools to the conversation, Dr. Justine Weber. Justine is a California licensed psychologist, a coach who helps people heal after narcissistic relationships, and she's certified in high conflict divorce coaching. She's also the author of the book with the title so many of us wish we had the nerve to say out loud, How the F Do I Heal from This? Understanding Narcissistic Abuse and How to Put Your Life Back Together. For those who want to find out more, I'll put a link to the book in the show notes. But together, Justine and I, we're going to walk through the 5 stages of divorcing a narcissist, from the moment you first think about leaving, all the way through healing and reclaiming your life. There is something here in this episode for everyone, no matter where you are on the journey. So let's get into it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, now's the time to share it. Justine, I'm so pleased that you're here today. This is a topic that my listeners really enjoy getting information on. It's so important. So thank you for being here.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here, Susan. Thanks for having me.
Well, and as we've plotted out what we want to talk about today, I think this is going to be one of those episodes that no matter where someone is in their journey through divorce, separation, post-separation, wherever they are, if they're dealing with someone who exhibits narcissistic behaviors or difficult personality behaviors, you have something for everyone in this episode. And that's really because you work with people in your practice, both as a therapist, but also as a coach, to help them no matter where they are in the process, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. From like pretty much from start to finish, all the stages that someone might be experiencing and going through.
Yeah. So anyone who's out there, I just want you to know there will be something for you, little tidbits, kernels, and of course, golden nuggets that are going to help you through this process. So let's dive in and talk about this from day one. And I'll call day one the period. It's not really day one, right? It's really like day probably hundreds, if not thousands, the time period when someone's thinking about leaving, when someone's trying to decide, should I stay, should I go? And there's a lot that goes on in that time, right? It's not that easy. I think we've learned that. It's not just a simple decision. I've had enough of this. I'm going to leave.
Mm-mm. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. No. I mean, it is this slow growing development of a, process where because this type of abuse, it starts off slow, nobody comes in at the very beginning, with red flags and anger and abuse. They're very charming and they're successful and they look good and we learn to trust them. And so years into this, it's like this slow, insidious pushing the boundaries, insulting you, being condescending, where you just eventually, it could be years, it could be 6 months, but typically the people that I work with, these relationships are a very, very long time, like a decade. And you just kind of reach this breaking point oftentimes where things are building. It's like more and more pain and more abuse, and things are getting worse, and you're losing more of yourself. And you just reach a point where you're like, I don't know if this is working. Like, is this ever going to get better? And so you really do reach this point, like, should I go? Should I stay? Should I try harder? It's so confusing.
Well, and it's, I have heard from people that there's a phenomena as well as someone is thinking that, should I go? And the other partner starts to sense maybe that pulling away, they love bomb. And they become that charming persona that you mentioned just a second ago. And it starts a cycle of kind of sucking the person back in, doesn't it?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It truly is. I mean, it's the abusive cycle, where they are love bombing you and they're charming and they're, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Everything's going to be so much better. And then when you are hooked again, then it's like this slowly like devaluing you and putting you down and condescending. And then you're so confused because you're like, we just had a really great dinner last night. We just had amazing sex. And now in the morning, you're telling me I'm an effing, blah, 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 and how you want me to go away and how I'm a loser. Like, that doesn't make sense. And so it's so confusing, this process. So I would really suggest, I think the most important strategy and tip that someone who is, and I'm just going to say women, I know that there's plenty women out there that are very abusive. In fact, it's interesting, but the men that I do work with, which is not the majority, it's a pretty small percentage, I have to say their ex-wives are truly more in the territory of psychopathic. I mean, they are just horrific, malignant, awful human beings. But I do, the majority of my clients are moms, are women. And so when you do reach this point where you're like, even if it's not 50%, even if it's 20%, and you're like, maybe I should go. This doesn't seem like it's getting better. I just don't know. I've got kids. We've got this business. I don't have a job. I don't have money. These are all very valid reasons. Start writing things down to document. So start like keep a journal, not in a location where your partner can find it or destroy it or anything like that. I oftentimes suggest like a phone app. When I was going through my situation, I used notes. I don't recommend that because there's no timestamp on it, but like Pages, a Google Doc, just some very secure way to start documenting what is happening. And so documentation would look like, or call it journaling. I don't care. Just start writing things down that is happening in front of you that makes you feel bad or makes you feel like, is this abuse? Is this, wrong? And so you can literally just as simple as March 25th, 2024. My husband yelled and humiliated me in front of the kids and blamed me for ruining the family dinner. Just keep it simple. My husband, 3:45 on April 23rd, picked up a glass and threw it at me and it shattered the wall and my son was right there. So just keep it simple because in a lot of ways, this will be so helpful even later on if you do decide to leave. This can actually be really helpful with trauma bonding, with detaching from that connection of seeing things clearly. And so start documenting when he yells at you, that nasty text, the blaming, the condescending, humiliating you in front of the kids, yelling at you in front of a dinner with all of your friends, storming off, being dysregulated. Because for somebody who has been in a relationship like this for a long period of time, like I said, it's insidious, it's slow growing, it's like slowly pushing the boundaries. We kind of develop this, we take more of it because we're adapting to a horrific situation. And so we're adapting. So years of being gaslit, it truly it truly destroys and shatters our capacity of remembering things, our perception, reality, sense of self, identity. Like everything is just so confused. We're drowning and flooded in self-doubt and second guessing. So this strategy really, even if you're like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure, it doesn't matter, just do it anyways, because it will really be helpful for your healing and recovery, even if you do decide to stay, which sometimes that does happen if there's cultural issues. And, for example, Indians, it's just not an option.
Right.
That's fine. At least it can kind of foster this truth and the reality of what's actually happening when you're living day to day where everything is so confusing and you're not sure. So start writing things down and secure it.
I think that's such an important tip for people. First off, I have to say, as a divorce attorney, those kinds of in the moment journaling, that's gold when you are in the divorce process, if in fact you are going through any sort of litigation, because it represents evidence, right? It's something that can be used in that context. So I do want to mention that, but it also goes, and I think it's so important that you said this, to maybe what the next stage is if you do decide to go, you have to do it safely and you have to have a plan. And you said, don't just like write in a journal and leave it laying out on the coffee table because that will get used against you. You need to be strategic in everything that you do in these relationships, whether you're still in the relationship, thinking about leaving the relationship or making a plan to leave it. Secrecy and safety are really critical, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, divorcing and leaving somebody who is this type of personality, this antagonistic, coercive controller, high conflict, like narcissistic, everything is different. You are not leaving somebody who is normal and has a normal, healthy capacity of reasoning, of regulating themselves, of being logical, of compromising. No. And so, because of that, everything is different, everything changes. And so, I have a lot of clients where they're where I'm suggesting certain things for them to do, such as put in cameras in your house, start tracking, especially if you have a husband who maybe gets kind of very dysregulated and gets angry and has these like rage episodes, instill cameras in your house. And so a lot of times these clients are like, oh, I feel bad. Like, it's not really something that I do. It's not who I am. I understand that. But you are trying to leave someone who is not normal. And so the rules and the game changes because of that. You have to protect yourself. And so when you are in that stage where you're like, okay, yes, I'm leaving for sure. Number one, do not tell your husband. Do not tell him.
Do not make an announcement.
Do not, even if you're in the first stage and you're like, I don't know, like once you kind of reach a point where you're like, this ain't changing. I don't know if I'm staying or going. I'm not interested in couples therapy anymore because we wasted so much money. It doesn't matter. Even if you're 40%, like maybe I might go, don't tell your husband. It will never, ever be helpful for you in any way. Do not tell him. My first suggestion is really go out there and start having consultations with attorneys that are the big shots in town, the really aggressive big shot attorneys. Start getting consultations with them so they can be conflicted out. And so that's like a strategy where, and then also I would lock down a attorney immediately. Interview a bunch of them. Don't ask questions like, are you familiar with like narcissism? Like my ex is, a narcissist, or, he's high conflict. No, attorneys and judges, they don't like that word because it's just used too much. But there are ways that you can ask them questions to get more of a sense if they're going to be have the bandwidth and the expertise of representing you. So you can ask, like, for example, questions like, what is your knowledge and experience of representing somebody whose ex is a manipulator, who is a charmer, who is really good at flipping the narrative, lying, showing up really good in court when it, they're all lies and like blaming me. Like, what is your experience of seeing through that in a courtroom so you can just be better prepared?
If I can say to that, I just want to point out, I really appreciate that what you're doing there is really honing in on the behaviors of someone, the behaviors that they exhibit, because you couldn't be more spot on about how the legal system views that word narcissist or narcissism. Judges, it's not that they don't care, but it has absolutely, that label gets you nothing in a courtroom.
I think it actually like reflects worse. I think in a courtroom, it makes you look bad, I think.
Well, it's so overused, unfortunately. Everyone thinks they're divorcing a narcissist or says that they are. And we know statistically probably not true. But what a judge really cares about is what is that person doing behaviorally that has negative consequences for you, for the relationship, for the finances, for the children, whatever that is. But that's what a judge cares about. So I think it's so important that you've shifted that narrative here for people when they are talking to attorney, to talk to the attorneys, not about, do you know how to divorce a narcissist, but do you know how to manage these behaviors in a courtroom? All right, this feels like the perfect spot to take a quick break so you can hear from one of our sponsors. So don't go anywhere, because when we come back, Justine and I will be getting into what happens when the legal process begins, how narcissists weaponize the courtroom, what kind of attorney actually understands this kind of case, and how to protect your kids from getting caught in the crossfire. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Let's take a little minute to talk about something special. If you follow me on Instagram, you all know how much I love my evil eye pendant. I love I have my bracelet. I have the pendant that goes around my neck. I wear evil eyes all the time. And so many of you have reached out asking where I got them. I'm thrilled to share with you all, drum roll please, that my favorite jewelry source, Yumi You Jewelry, is now a sponsor of Divorce and Beyond. For me, Yumi Yu jewelry is more than just jewelry. The symbols are symbols of strength, individuality, and empowerment. And they handcraft each piece with love and care. And so they are designed to help women stand out and embrace our unique personalities. So whether it's an evil eye, like I have chosen for protection, a hamsa for faith, or any other meaningful symbol, their pieces offer beauty and inspiration even during these tough times like divorce. So here's the best part. Yumi Yu is giving my listeners an exclusive discount if you use the code BEYOND, that's BEYOND, all caps, at checkout. You'll get 20% off your order. 20%. So if you're looking for a meaningful piece to keep you inspired or to protect you during this difficult time, visit divorcebeyond.com/YumiYu. That's YUMIYU. There will be a link in the show notes. And treat yourself or treat someone you love to something special. You deserve it. Now, let's get back to the second half of the show. I do have to say, the lawyer in me is saying, when you talk about installing cameras, nope, I want my listeners to know some states that is a crime. If you don't have the permission of the other party to film or audio tape them. So do check the law on that before you do it. Some states it are one person consent states and you can do that. But do be careful with that. But I think your key point is really important for people to understand. And it's again going to that documentation. And in some ways, it strikes me that what you're saying is for you, for the person who's living through these cycles of abuse and behaviors that are not the norm or not acceptable, it's almost sanity proving for them to a certain degree, right? It's like saying, no, you're not crazy. And does this go to gaslighting?
Absolutely. I mean, this is, it's the best version of documentation when, especially these narcissistic, high conflict people, they are typically very dysregulated. Like their nervous systems are just wired differently.
Let's define dysregulated for my listeners who don't know that term. Give us sort of a good definition for them to understand. Like, what does dysregulation look like in their spouse? How is that defined in your world?
If you are noticing your spouse, maybe something that you are perceiving in your environment as maybe like a small problem. Maybe you brought home dinner and you ordered the wrong thing for your spouse. Their nervous system, they shift into fight or flight, become incredibly angry, and will start lashing out and blaming and attacking, just so angry in terms of their thought process. They are very reactive, blaming, but then also in their body too. I mean, they are just flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, and they go into this attack mode. And so in the narcissistic kind of abusive cycle, it's called rage, essentially. Rage, when their shame is kind of, oftentimes their shame kind of comes up, you catch them in a lie or something, they will shift into rage as a way of protecting themselves and kind of push down the shame. And so living in an environment like that, I mean, just horrific. It would just make everybody in the household just live in fear, walking on eggshells. You're trying to avoid things, trying to keep the peace because you don't want them to get all, ramped up like that. Anger, rage, dysregulation, it's all kind of this umbrella of what it's like being in a relationship with someone like that. And then you top on having children.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
And so you're just like, no, it's really not okay. Sorry, I ordered you a chicken quesadilla. I'm so sorry. Like the world's coming to an end. I mean, they lack the ability of operating from their prefrontal cortex of seeing something very clearly and analyzing it in the environment in the moment to respond more appropriately. They lack that capacity. And so it can look very childlike, almost like this tantrumy child where you're like, no, you can't have ice cream for breakfast. And they're like, you know, like
Laying
hamstring.
down on the floor, kicking their
There's
arms and
no
legs,
difference with
right? Yeah.
with a husband when get something wrong. So I do agree with you. I just want to say that from a legal perspective, I do agree with you. And this would never be used in court. And you don't even actually have to tell your attorney about it. But sometimes if you get to the point in a court situation, if your ex knows that you were catching him in moments where he was super dysregulated and throwing things in front of the kids and yelling at you, you can oftentimes use that kind of as leverage in a court.
As
Just
long as it's not
know
in a
that you
state
have
where
it. It's
that's a
not ever
crime.
going
Yeah.
to be used in court. Don't even tell your attorney. Just use it. But it can also be a way to document the truth. And so when you've left this relationship, you probably have trauma bonding. You still care about the person. It's very confusing. And so, a way to kind of detach from the trauma bonding sooner is when you can go back, read these journal entries, watch these videos where you're like, wow, I actually forgot about how often he, attacked me and threatened me and threw these things at me. And so, it can help to break that sooner.
And verify the reality that is in discordant with what they're saying the reality was, right? That's what you hear
Exactly.
so often. And one thing I want to point out to my listeners here, we talked about at the top of this episode how you work with people really at any stage that they are in this process. And we're talking about all of the stages. But I do want to point out that I hope that my listeners can hear that the sooner you are, the earlier you are in the process, that you get support from a coach or an informed therapist, depending on your needs, what a difference it can make, because you have someone like you, Justine, right there, helping to explain what to your average person isn't information we have in our normal lexicon. This isn't part of what we learn growing, hopefully you don't have to learn this growing up, but that only makes it harder to deal with down the road. And so getting that coach, if you suspect this is going on for you, reaching out for coaching, reaching out for that type of support or therapy is really a critical support to getting through this and surviving it.
Absolutely. I mean, the sooner the better. I mean, that's why even if you're like, maybe 20% I might leave, why would it hurt anything? Even, if you hired somebody to be strategic and to kind of help develop a plan, if in the event that you do, when I was going through my stuff, like we did not have coaches like this. I mean, it's just, so everything was just so much harder, and takes longer. But if you're working with somebody who knows and understands and can give you that perspective and sense of clarity as you're navigating this, making really, really hard decisions, and you're scared, you're going into the unknown, you're scared for your safety, you're unsure, working with somebody to just kind of hold your hand along this path, it can really make a huge difference. I notice a huge difference with the moms when I am able to connect with them at this first stage where they're like, yeah, my husband's kind of a douche and he's this and he's that, but I just don't know, or I can't leave. Totally fine. So I can work with you on ways to protect yourself, ways to kind of stay in the relationship if you need to stay in the relationship a little bit longer before you get that certification or something, or he's going to get that bonus. I could work with you on ways to develop strategies while you're staying in the marriage so you're not feeling as crazy and you're really fostering and growing that sense of reality and truth, because of all the gaslighting. Everything is just so confusing.
Well, and I think that's really important for people to understand, right? There's something about understanding the process of what's happening. And you called it earlier sort of a cycle. It is a cycle. The same things, the behaviors happen and the same things go on. What changes when you get the right support is how you manage those behaviors. And that can be that can be life-saving, to be, a little dramatic, but truthful. But it also is what can, if you do need to stay for whatever reasons, or if you're being strategic in when you leave, as we were just talking about, you don't make the announcement that you're leaving, you get your plan in place. But what about for the person? Because ultimately, I have to say 35 years as a divorce attorney, people in these relationships, at least disproportionately, it seems to me, since I'm the divorce attorney, but they end up having to leave the relationship, right? So eventually many people will make that decision. They need to get out for whatever reason. And unfortunately, the way the legal system is set up, that can be when the real trouble starts. You think everything that's gone before was bad, but you get involved in the legal system. And unfortunately, you really start to need some strategies and some survival skills at this point.
Absolutely. So, post-separation abuse is very real. It happens to pretty much everybody. And research shows that the abuse, once you leave the house, your ex leaves, you file papers. Once they reach that point where, oh my gosh, it's final, it is such a huge blow to their ego. They feel rejected. That's where like the rage starts to kind of surface, and the attacks, the abuse for most people oftentimes intensifies. And so they oftentimes use the children because you're not living together in the same house anymore. And so they oftentimes find other ways to abuse, isolate you, harm, using the children, reaching out to your family, trying to kind of create that triangulation with your close friends and family. Because if you're alone and isolated, it's easier to control someone when you don't have that sounding board or other people in your support system. So when you do leave, I think that's why like these are all just steps. Have a plan in place, a strategic exit strategy. Once you leave, maybe already sign a lease for a place, have that all in place. But you have to develop and foster and strengthen a really good support system. You cannot do this alone. I had a session about a week ago with a client, and she's like, Justine, you always say like, you can't do it alone. Well, she kind of did actually, because of where she was living. She was living in a really isolated place. Her family was not helpful. Her friends kind of bailed. It was really sad. She was working with me the whole time. But so if you live in an area where you're very isolated and it's not an option to hire a coach or a therapist or a divorce coach, that's fine. Foster and strengthen your friendships, family members, your community. If you're part of a church, educate yourself. You have to educate yourself. I always say the 3 pillars of really healing from and getting out somewhat sane in a relationship like this is really educating yourself, working with someone. You cannot do this alone, and your support system. But find the right people in your circle where you feel not judged, accepted, understood, validated. I always find oftentimes friends of people who are going through something like this are oftentimes the worst, unfortunately. And so when you're, say, like 6 months into the divorce and you're talking to your sister and you're like, oh gosh, I really miss him at times, or, I'm still going through with this, but I do miss him. Your sister's like, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you miss him? Like, he's an awful person. Like you don't need to.
We never understood why you were with him in the first place,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
It always comes out.
Or my favorite one, which is so, oh my gosh, it makes my hair stand. Why didn't you leave sooner? Like, you knew this. Like, why did you stay for 10 years when you were separated at 3 years? Why do you keep going back to him? Or why did you keep going back to him? Don't ask questions like that. That's not helpful. So the best thing, if you are talking to a friend or a family member and you're noticing consistently this pattern where when you hang up the phone or get out of the car, you feel worse, you feel judged, you feel smaller, you feel confused, you feel stupid, cut that person off for the time being. go find somebody else or distance yourself because they're not being helpful. They don't know what to say. And I think that's really what this problem is, because this is so, it's hard to wrap your head around it. People don't understand. They just don't. Most people don't understand. They just don't understand this type of debilitating and devastation of this type of psychological abuse, and how it truly, it breaks down the self, where, your thought process, everything is just shattered. And then trauma bond happens with most people. And so just all of that takes time. So if it means you being really clear with your support system, your sister, your church leader, or whatever, of like, hey, I'm really needing you to just agree with me, validate me, tell me how much you support me and you're always going to be here. I need to hear that. Please don't judge me. Please don't give suggestions. Please don't give feedback. That's not helpful. I just need this. So sometimes just being specific of what you're needing from them, but you need your circle of people. And if you don't have family or they betrayed you, find another support system. There's a lot of online support groups. Tina Swithin is a wonderful one. Dana Morningstar. She has, I think it's a free one where you can join groups, support groups in your area and talk to women that are in similar, but to have that sounding board of like, this is normal. You're going to be okay. I'm here with you. I've experienced something similar. You're doing a good job. Like, this must be really hard. I'm so sorry. Like, that's the stuff you need to hear. That's helpful.
Not
judgment.
What you did wrong or what they judgment. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I do want to say Tina's been on the podcast a couple of times. One Mom's Battle. I'll link to her episodes as well in the show notes. And I think that's really important what you're saying here. I really love that you give people and empower people with the ability to say what they need from people. Say what you need. I don't need your judgment. What I need is your acceptance and your understanding and your support right now.
And patience.
And patience.
Because people have this idea of, it's been 6 months and you're divorced. Why are you still fantasizing him? About him. So everybody
that's judgment, by the way, folks.
Right.
So
don't say that.
I do want to ask you, because you mentioned this, and I think it is one of the reasons why it's so hard for people to leave very often. And you've referenced many of your clients as moms. Very often, the children are going to get weaponized, right? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts and strategies for trying to the extent that you can, protect your children through this process.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Number one, start documenting things wherever you are at. If you have children, if you're going to go through mediation or trial, it doesn't matter. But start documenting what your children are saying. And so when they go to their dad's house and they come back and they're just like, oh, I hate going to dad's house. Do I really have to go there? I just like, he's sleeping all day, or he's out with his girlfriend or whatnot. Start documenting that. So that's one piece because of the court situation. But then also take this role of really not being, this is from Christina Cocchiella. I don't want to take up.
Christine Cocchiella. She's also been on the podcast. I'll link to Dr. Christine's episodes.
She's amazing. I love Christine. But she always talks about, like, you're no longer a mom. Take on the role of being a therapist and really just, foster and grow this unconditional positive regard, sense of safety, trust, calm, and curiosity with your child. So if your child is just, the more present, the more calm, the more regulated that you can show up with your child, this will be incredibly helpful for their own journey as they navigate all of this, trying to manage of having a parent with this type of personality. And so when they're, if they're going to their dad's and they're just like, oh, I don't want to go. When am I coming back? I hate going to my dad's house. Could just be like, I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry you feel that way. Do you want to talk about it? Like, what do you like? Why don't you want to go? And just be curious. It's not a matter of like, don't gaslight your children and be like, your dad loves you and you're going to have so much fun. No, just literally state the truth of like, you seem like you really don't want to go. You seem sad, or point out an emotion that you're noticing in your child, and just be with them. Be that calm, stable, loving mother that you probably already are. Moving forward, this is going to be so incredibly helpful, but always continue to document whenever they come back from dads, anything that they say that may or may not be used, just document. You have no idea where that might be helpful in terms of child custody.
It becomes really important, but that aspect that you are talking about being the present, calm, unconditional love parent, I don't think that can be underestimated. It's, by the way, very hard to do because here are your children presenting in distress, and you can't change their co-parent, right? You have in fact, if you could, none of you would be in this situation today, but literally cannot do it. All you can do is work with them with what you have. But I've seen it when a parent's been able to be there for their children in that way, and the effect that it has for children, even when they have another parent who is dysregulated and all of the things that you've talked about in this episode. There is a magic to it for those children. They need at least one parent who is the oasis, right? Or the protective parent, as Christine calls them, or whatever we might want to, use the term. But it's really, I've always called it the oasis parent, the parent where the children know they can come and be who they are and not be gaslighted and not be told everything's fine and just be a kid or any of those things, but also without being ramped up as well. Just be that parent.
Yes, your kids need it more than ever. And so you hopefully are the opposite of your home is the opposite of what your ex is in his home, where there's calm, there's peace, but this sense of just knowing, I mean, that's why, like, I always tell my clients, like, just continue to tell your kids, like, I love you unconditionally. You can always talk to me. Anything that is on your mind, you can talk to me and I will listen and I will hear you. I'm here for you. And so narcissistic parents or, fathers' parents, they tend to not really listen. They tend to tell. They tend to dominate. They try to control the narrative, make things about them. And so that's why your kids are starving for this kind of engagement and connection, but mainly this sense of safety where like, you can talk to me about anything that is on your mind. And I'm here for you. I will always love you, be curious about them. But that's why, Susan, I think it's stage 3 or whatnot, even stage 1, it is so crucial for the mom, the healthy parent, to get the support, the resources that they need because they are managing so much. They have to have the bandwidth. They have to have the emotional capacity to take this on. You're trying to think clearly, trying to manage the court stuff. You're trying to protect your children. You have a lot of guilt for even marrying this person and bringing children into the world. You're dealing with your own trauma from being abused for 8 years, 15 years, 20 years. You are dealing with your own trauma. But I mean, it's just so much. And so that's why it's almost like a priority. It's not selfish. Moms oftentimes just do over much, for their children, but this is actually the time where you need to be selfish. So if it's a matter of dilemma of, what, my son has a soccer game or a soccer practice tomorrow at 4:00, but I actually booked a lymphatic massage. He's not going to the game. He's not going to the practice. Do your lymphatic massage. If you are going to a yoga class, acupuncture, going out with your friends, a therapy appointment, a group class, all of that stuff, or even just quite frankly, going for a walk outside just to decompress and to kind of ground yourself. That is a priority. If you are taking care of yourself emotionally, physically, psychologically, you will have more bandwidth and be able to show up better through that lens of being calm, stable, curious, loving, more for your children. You will actually take on more. So it really is focus on you, get those massages, go to the spa, see your therapist, journal, go on walks, do acupuncture, whatever you need to ground yourself, do breath work.
No, I mean, what you're really saying is there's a case here where that, phrase self-care isn't selfish is the most true thing that's going to get you through this. Talk about a strategy. I don't want us to miss, because there's one more stage of this entire process, and listeners are probably going, no, we've should I stay or say we've done? Yeah, I'm exhausted, Susan.
I'm depressing.
Justine, let's get done with this. But there is one more stage, and honestly, I hate to tell you all, but this one can even be worse than the other four, and that is post dissolution or post the divorce, when you think, oh, it's all done. The divorce is finalized. We're finally through this. That took 1 year, 4 years, 10 years. I've heard them all. But now we've moved into post-separation abuse and healing. What would you want people to know at the high level? So, because there are people out there who are listening right now who think, oh my God, I wish I'd had a Justine while I was going through my divorce, but my divorce was 5 years ago. I'm still having a hard time holding it together, or it feels like this hasn't ended. Guess what? You probably have not been able to heal yet, or you're probably dealing with post-separation abuse.
Yeah, so the last stage really is going beyond healing. Again, if you do the work, you put in the time, spend the money to get the treatment, the help, the resources that you need. If you've been finalized for quite some time, you barely see your ex, except for the exchanges with the kids and whatnot. Maybe you might be at this place where you're like, you know what? Like I'm kind of feeling a lot better. I'm still a bit isolated, but I want to expand my friendships. I just kind of want to live life. So if you do the work and put in the time, really at this stage, you really are fostering and growing and clarifying your sense of identity, your self, your independence, your autonomy. I mean, coming out of a relationship like this, again, if you do the work and spend the money and the time, I noted there is such a light at the end of the tunnel, such a beautiful one, that these women and people just live such extraordinary lives. They oftentimes, once they come out of it and they're like, you know what? I've been a teacher my whole life, but I didn't work for 8 years, but I want to become an interior designer. Like I've always been a creative person. And so they end up just completely transforming and shifting their life and their self, where they're really living in alignment with who they always were, but it's better because of all the work. And so, but it's a huge process of like identifying what your needs are in a relationship. Like, what are your boundaries? Learning to trust again, relationships, because there's been so much betrayal and damage. And so it's normal. It's a trauma response to just shut out, to avoid. I'm just not even going to try with friendships or another man. It's just safer to just not even try because I've been disappointed and hurt so badly. But, Susan, we are all human beings, and it's taking the easy route to just be like, I'm just never going to date again or have friends, and I'm just going to live this isolated on Amish country. But we actually need connection in life. We actually need it to survive and for our longevity. And so finding those small ways of beginning to put yourself out there again with old friendships, new friendships, try if there's a pickleball in your area or something, just how can you try to start meeting new people to, with this version of this more developed, evolved self where you have boundaries, but you have to at least try. It really, like, a lot of the people I work with are just like, no, I'm really comfortable of just being by myself. I'm okay. I've got my kids, friends. I don't need a man. I don't need anybody. I'm actually fine. And it's like, that's being stuck in your past where your ex is still controlling the narrative of your life. If you're like, I'm good, I'm just going to go celibate the rest of my life. No, no, that's actually like, you don't have to be paralyzed for the rest of your life of still being controlled, of not trying to develop that healthy connection where you can find that sense of safety and boundaries and love and trust. It's out there.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen countless, people, and I think it's interesting, you're talking about the person you are before the abusive relationship. Who you become is a somewhat faded version of yourself during that abusive relationship. And then you come out on the other side, and honestly, in many ways, you are a new person, but you don't know her very well. And so part of the process is healing from what has happened, but also discovering who that new person is. So in one of the most beautiful ways for many people, although they may not realize it, stage 5 is really the stage, and for the podcast purposes, right? That's when your beyond begins. That's when you get to discover the new you and move forward. But there's certainly support that even if you didn't have support through the other 4 stages, and bless you, you got here, you still can benefit greatly from having support. One of the things that you've done, because I know that, we've talked about a lot already in the 5 stages, and you've given some of your tips here, but you've actually put together a downloadable handout for people that they can go to and get. We're going to have a link in the show notes that you've given some of your top tips through all of these stages. Do you want to tell people a little bit about that?
I guess it's called a carousel in like the social media terms. That's what my team described it, but it's just kind of at each of these stages, just some tips to take home to think about. And you could, incorporate them and integrate them in your life. You can talk to other people about it if you maybe like just know of someone who is in this kind of a situation and whatnot. But yeah, to have something kind of tangible as like to kind of go back and be like, oh, actually, that was a good idea. I think I'm going to try that. So that will be attached to the show notes.
Yeah, we'll have the link in the show notes. And I also want to put in the show notes because I've mentioned again throughout the episode that you work with clients in 2 different ways. Some clients you work with as their therapist, others you work with as a coach. If someone wanted to reach out to you for more information, who's looking for support in any one of the 5 stages that we've talked about, or to get more resources, what is the best way for someone to reach out to you?
By email. I have all the social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And so you can get a link to my websites. I have 2 websites. One is for coaching, where I work with people all around the country in all these different stages. And then also my private practice. I'm licensed in California. And so I have a website for that. It's called sereneshift.com. So I would say by email. I also don't mind a call or a voicemail. I'm kind of
old school. Yeah.
I'm kind of old school like that. My phone number is listed on both of my websites. And so like a text message from someone, hey, I just like listened to your podcast, or I saw your website. And then that would probably be the quickest we can schedule a consultation. You can, on my coaching business, drjustineweber.com, you can schedule a free consultation from there.
Oh, wonderful.
So if you want, so either way, but yeah, I'm a bit old school. I don't like the whole social media has been really hard for me to wrap my head around.
Well, but it is, it is a wonderful way for people to get information. In fact, I just did an episode though about some of the information you get from social media when it comes to divorce isn't good information. So I encourage you, if you're looking for information on any of these 5 stages, or on how a therapist or a coach can support you during this process, reach out directly to Justine and get that information. As always, listeners, we will have all the links to Justine's 2 websites, her social media, to the downloadable carousel. Everything that we've talked about here will all be in the show notes for you. Really, this is sort of just a small idea of what someone can do to help educate you, support you, and lead you in a supportive way through this very difficult journey. You don't have to go it alone. And in fact, one of the things I've said to clients throughout the years, one of the most important things, honestly, is that you have a good coach or a therapist if you are going through this process. I think it's probably the most critical team member that you could have, because you just need it.
You need that sounding board.
Yeah, you do. You just do. You will come out on the other side into your beyond and be able to heal and move forward. It will happen. It will happen faster and easier if you have that guiding hand. So, Justine, I very much appreciate your sharing your insights and wisdom with my listeners. This is such a scary journey for people. So knowing that there are professionals out there like you, I hope is bringing them some comfort, and they'll be reaching out to find out more. So thank you.
Thanks so much.
Before we go, let's wrap up with a few golden nuggets from today's powerful conversation with Dr. Justine Weber. First off, remember, document, don't debate. Whether you leave or stay, start safely recording what's happening in your relationship, privately and securely. It's not just for legal reasons, it's a reality check for you. But remember, actually recording your spouse, whether audio or video, may be illegal in your state without their consent. Always check your local laws first and talk to your attorney before you hit record. Next nugget, leave strategically, not emotionally. Don't announce you're leaving until you've built your plan, consulted professionals, and locked down your support system. Remember, in our next nugget, your kids need calm, not conflict. So you should be their safe space, not a second battleground. Stay grounded, stay present, and let your love be louder than the noise. And finally, healing isn't just possible, it's transformational. With the right support, education, and community, you can go beyond survival and rediscover who you really are. You don't have to do this alone, and you shouldn't. The links to Justine's tips, contact info, and her downloadable resource are all waiting for you in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.